Good afternoon, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and welcome to week 2 of Sagalong. So Sagalong is a month-long read-along where this year we are reading Njal's saga, and we're reading 40 chapters of it a week. They're quite short chapters, so that makes quite short chunks in the book. And last week, when I was talking about Njal's saga, I said that I didn't have that much to say and it wouldn't be a very long video, and then I proceeded to talk for 20 minutes. I don't think that's going to happen today, but I just want to continue to enthuse and gush about how much I'm enjoying Njal's saga. I kind of, I don't have the best memories of the first sagas that I've read. I enjoyed them, but I also found them quite difficult to read. I'm not finding that with this. I'm finding that I can quite easily pick it up and happily read several chapters, and that I get into it. I get the sense of suspense. I get the build-up. I get to care about the characters. And I really like the way that it's working narratively. So sagas have this thing where there is quite a lot of setup on foreshadowing, and then there's often quite a lot of sudden changes in direction and things that you the route that you expect the narrative to take isn't necessarily the route that it continues to take. So at the end of week 1 segment, at chapter 40, we were having this blood feud between Gunnar's family and Njal's family. And Gunnar and Njal are friends, but their wives had a bit of an argument going between them, and they were basically using their influence to send people out to kill each other, and things were just gradually scaling up between the people that were killed went from being slaves to companions to friends to becoming increasingly important. And knowing what I know, which is that I'm going to say this now because it's happened and we're up to chapter 80 in the read-along, so spoilers for up to chapter 80, knowing that Gunnar and some other important characters were likely to die, my assumption was that they would die as part of this escalating feud. And I really saw that pattern of that particular conflict going on to take over the whole of the rest of the saga, I suppose. But then we had this sudden about turn, and somehow that feud was kind of left at a certain point, and one of those wives who was driving the competition, Helgard, kind of went off in a different direction, and instead of taking revenge for a previous killing, she decided to kind of branch out and perhaps work on a slightly more broader vendetta against, I don't know, she seems to pretty much hate the whole of everyone who isn't her. And she went on a cheese stealing mission. She didn't go herself, but she sent a slave. I said this in the group chat, but I seriously did not expect that sliced cheese would play such a crucial role in an Icelandic saga, because she sends someone to go and steal some cheese from somebody else's kitchen at a time when there's a shortage of food. And then they take these big cheeses home, and you've got to think of these big handmade cheeses that have been put into these molds. And then the cheese all gets sliced up. And somebody who is very wise in the ways of the law, and I've forgotten his name, I know which character it is, but there's so many names, let's just not worry about the names. Somebody's like, oh well, we need to go and pretend to buy things from them, because people always will sell the thing that they've stolen because they'll want to get rid of it. So people go around and they buy things from this household, and they buy all the cheese. And they take the cheese away, and then they line it all up, and they see that it makes the mold of the cheese that was stolen. And it's just revelations. It's absolutely brilliant in terms of the detail of, yes, oh well, we know that Helgard stole the cheese because the cheese fit the mold when you put all the slices together. It's details like that really make the book so much more endearing. I'm not fussed about the details of the battle scenes. I do find them very descriptive and very powerful, and they really help with your mental image of who the fighting parties are and what their techniques are, and sometimes the blows that they strike kind of reflect their character. Gunnar goes through a whole period in these 40 chapters of throwing things and people into rivers. He tends to kill them and then chuck them in the river. So you can kind of see patterns of how a certain warrior develops their character. But yeah, it's things like the cheese that are more endearing and more make me warm to the book more, I suppose. I guess narratively, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the kind of pattern of threes and the payoff that you get from the pattern of threes in this book, which is the same for a couple of other sagas as well. And it's kind of like a thing that we still have, like fairy tales as well. Things come in threes, and the third one is always the worst one or the one where things resolve. So if you think about Cinderella goes to, in the more traditional version of the fairy tale, she goes to 3 balls and dances with the prince each night until finally, like, the final dance. Or the Goldilocks has to try 3 bowls of porridge, things like that. So there are 2 sets of 3, there are probably more, but there are 2 sets of 3 that I specifically noticed that both lead towards the climax of this section, that climax being Gunnar's death. And the first is Halgerd and her husbands, and Halgerd getting hit by her husbands. So Gunnar is Halgerd's 3rd husband. Her first husband hit her and she had him killed deliberately. Her second husband hit her and she said she didn't want to have him killed, but somebody killed him anyway. And her third husband hit her and she just said, "You'll pay for this eventually." And eventually happens in about, I think it's like chapter 79, it's just before the end of this section, when he turns to her and he really needs her help with something. He actually wants one of her hairs to use as a bowstring, which, like, I have quite long hair, a bit like Halgerd. Halgerd has long hair. I'm not sure how well hair would work as a bowstring, but let's just brush that aside for now. And he says, "Please let me have some of your hair and my mother can combine it together and then I'll use it to be able to fight off my attackers." And she's like, you hit me once, probably about 10 years ago now, and because of that, I'm going to let you go to your death. So it's this idea of when Halgerd's husbands hit her, they will die. It's just that the first death was almost instant, the second death was a little bit delayed, and the third death was obviously significantly more delayed. But that was like an element of Gunnar's fate that was hanging over him, because we knew that he'd hit her, so we should have kind of been able to predict that his death was going to come about in a way that was connected with her. The other set of 3s is Gunnar being ambushed or attacked by a large group of men, and having a tiny bit of warning that it's going to happen, and then but then like still having to go into that conflict. So all of those happen in this section, and the first time he has a dream, and he has a dream that there's a pack of wolves that are hiding. They're on this journey, they stop, they have a sleep, and he has a dream that they're going to meet a pack of wolves on this journey, and he's like, I know this is going to be, people are going to attack us, and he tries to send people back so that they don't get killed, and they're like, no, we're going to stay with you. And then, of course, the pack of wolves turns out to be this pack of men that's come to attack them, but Gunnar is this amazing, heroic soldier, and he fights them off, he kills them all. He's like really kind of a little bit overpowered, like, I guess he's a Gary Stew. Is he a Gary Stew? No, because he has too much character to be that, but he's just a bit too powerful. So he fights them all off. And then the next time, I think they're coming up to a river ford, and he kind of has this idea, I think, that something, I can't remember what the specifics are, but he thinks something dodgy is going on, and he thinks they're going to be ambushed. And he gets himself into a better defensive position, and he is ambushed, and he attacks them. And again, both times, somebody escapes. So that somebody who escapes then turns out to set up the conflict in the next round. The third time round, it's his dog that warns him. So he's asleep in his room, in his house, in like the loft of his house. It's really descriptive as well, like the way that they set up this scene where Gunnar dies. It talks about his house and the roof of his house and where they sleep in the house, and you get this really clear vision of them like sleeping in this loft and the windows that he has and things like that. It's more description than I would have expected for a text that's so old. So anyway, he's in this house and he hears somebody murder this very loyal dog that he's been given as a gift. And he's like, right, I think our deaths aren't fated to be far apart, me and my dog. And then that conflict begins again. And all of those times, I think it's something like 30 men. It's always a big group of men that Gunnar is set out against. I couldn't help being reminded in Gunnar's death scene of when Boromir dies in Lord of the Rings, and just like there are just so many people attacking him, and he just like keeps, well, in Boromir's case it's orcs, and he just keeps like hauling himself up again and striking back, and then he grabs another weapon and he pulls himself up again and he strikes back, and just like you just can't quite keep him down until eventually like sheer force of numbers is what kills him, that and the betrayal of his wife. So yeah, I just really liked the way that, because we'd seen those 2 previous attacks that he had a little bit of warning of, we kind of narratively, we knew that this attack was going to be the point that he wasn't going to be able to overcome. And there are various prophecies and things built into the text that also tell us that. But yeah, I really appreciate the depth of the structure, that it's not just things happen and then he dies. It's really the incidents all tie together and they weave together to come to this final conclusion and this final event, and they are continuing to weave together for presumably the second half of the saga. Even when they do subvert the expectations of which feud is going to end up with the character's death. There's definitely foreshadowing already starting for the things that are happening later on in the book. For instance, we've had some references to burning. We've had a fire that was set up in a granary. We've had somebody saying, oh, we should burn this house down, and somebody else saying, no, we never burn houses down, that's a bad idea. And I happen to know, thanks to the introduction, that there is probably going to be some burning involved in later portions of the saga. So just little things like that are kind of cropping up to let us know what to look out for, I suppose. So that is the second section of Njal's saga. And I'm going to leave it at that. Just about 11 minutes, not ridiculously too long, I think, and just continue to highly recommend this book. It's been really enjoyable to read so far, and I'm looking forward to reading the next section. Thank you to all of the fantastic co-hosts for continuing to make this so entertaining and interesting. Okay, I'm going to list all of the names below in the description. Thank you.